Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got him.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to be great and dominate.
Well, all right. Welcome into Operation Domination. Don't hope to win, be great and dominate. And that's never been more true than week 17, our championship week. We are here, fellas. This is the moment we have literally worked all year for nonstop because we don't take breaks because we're working for this moment right here, right now. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mater, joined here with Chase Thornton and Adam LaRue. Make sure you check out and download Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app and look at our video content when you go to the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. And like I said, we don't take breaks, so we're going to keep going throughout at least one episode a week as we get into week 18 moving forward. Don't worry, the Christmas week is not screwing up the amount of episodes we're doing. Just everything's all over the place. We're recording this episode a full 24 hours early for you guys. You can make sure you get the information you need for your championship weeks. We got 3 games on Christmas Day. We have 2 games on Saturday, and then, of course, Sunday and Monday, too. So this will be dropping right here for you guys on Christmas Eve. I think I'm going to go live. I'm not exactly sure yet. Either live or drop it real late Christmas Eve night with Chaz Filardi of Sports Betting Weekly. We want to bet on the entire slate, so I moved that around. The one episode, unfortunately, that I had to kind of put past Christmas Day will be the injury inquiry episodes. I'm going to have Ben McCown from the Fantasy Football Advice Network, Dynasty Gambit, on again, but that won't be until Saturday morning. That'll drop. So we will have you update as far as anybody who has concerned for Saturday and Sunday and Monday games, but Christmas Day games, if you want to hit me up at social media at Dan Mater FF, you can, and I will help you out for those injuries there too and what to do fantasy football wise. Let's get to the elephant in the room. If I have no voice, and you can tell I have no voice, there's a reason for that. I was screaming all night long as Adam and I were at the 49ers Colts game and how glorious it was for San Francisco. I'm sorry, Adam. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was tough, but I had a good first quarter.
It was fun.
I got to see Phillip Rivers throw a touchdown pass to Alec Pierce in the end zone we were seated by. So that was at least there's something.
There was.
Gonna be a weird one. Got to see Phillip Rivers throw to Alec Pierce after coming back from his retirement. So at least I can hold on to that memory.
You can hold on to that. I mean, it was a back and forth game, wild scoring. We had a lot of fun. It was a fun game to watch, especially when you're a 49ers fan, but that's neither here nor there. And I know that they definitely won some people some fantasy weeks to get them into the championship because Purdy was quarterback 1 on the week. McCaffrey, I think he was the RB2, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere along there. Kittle was the tight end 1, even though he only played 3.5 quarters or 3 quarters, basically, because he didn't play the entire fourth quarter. So it was a big week, big Monday night for fantasy football purposes. So now, hopefully, that propelled you to this week. We're going to do what we usually do. We're going to tackle what we think are some of the most popular type of start-sit questions that are out there surrounding guys I think a lot of people are going to be asking questions about, depending upon the league and situation that you're in. And even though it's championship week, and these are going to be the 2 best teams in your league, it doesn't mean the decisions you have to make are all that pretty. And that's definitely proven in our first question to kick this thing off, because I'm like, yep, this is a topic. Quinn Ewers versus Tampa Bay in a Superflex league. Can I start him? And this is a topic I see a lot of places people are asking me the question. Oh, my God. Adam, let's go to you because I think this hits home with you.
Yeah, I mean, can is like the operative word here. Because like I'm not going to suggest you do it. I'm not like, he's not in my top 24. Like, it's none of that. But like, to be honest with you, a bad quarterback can often be better than like a wide receiver 5. So if that's the decision we're making, a 4-target wide receiver, Quinn Ewers, then I'm probably going to start Quinn Ewers. If I have someone who I expect to get more than 10, I'm probably going to start that player. But otherwise, like, to be honest with you, sometimes you just don't have a choice. And we've seen this time and time again, every fantasy championship. We've all been in leagues, right? Where like, for example, one of the leagues I commissioned in 2022, the championship winning team on the championship week started QB1 David Blau, and their Superflex quarterback was what's his name? He was the Raiders and Broncos quarterback. Started the end. No, Raiders when Carr got back. Started 4 games at the end of the season.
Oh, you're doing trivia my brain can't handle right now.
Great. Some formidable quarterbacks, point being. Make that really clear. But at any rate, and they won with, won a fantasy championship. So it happens. You could be that desperate genuinely to where you do actually, like, it is the correct answer to start Quinn Ewers, but you're doing everything in your power not to.
Yeah. Tend to agree. Chase, what do you got on this?
Ho, ho, ho. No. Do not start Quinn. Listen, I have to have the courage of my convictions. You guys all heard me last week. You heard me all through, and all of us all through the draft process about Quinn Ewers. I cannot, in good faith and conscience, suggest starting Quinn Ewers in any way, shape, or form. And yes, I did run that statement by our legal department, and they are behind me 100%. Even the lawyers don't want you starting Quinn Ewers this week. Now, in fairness to him, 260 yards passing last week is about 180 more than I thought he would have. Okay. But he did throw you no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He finished with 6.9 points. Okay. Quarterback 28. He was 1 spot ahead of Chris Oladokin, for what that's worth in quarterback play. There were literally
and 1 spot ahead of Josh Allen. Just saying.
Yes. Well, yeah, Josh Allen. Yeah. In the fluke of flukes, and that probably cost a lot of people their championship, spot. But there were literally 100 on the nose, 100 flex eligible players, non-quarterbacks, who finished tied or ahead of Quinn Ewers in half PPR scoring there. There were 100 other guys you could have started that would have given you the same or better results that were not quarterbacks that you could have plugged into your Superflex spot and done better than Quinn Ewers. So please, pretty please, with sugar on top. It's Christmas week, so for the sake of our dear 8-pound, 6-ounce newborn baby Jesus, do not use Quinn Ewers even in a Superflex this week. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. So last week he finished the quarterback 26, and honestly, that was a better performance than I thought we were going to get a Quinn Ewers in the first place. I got my quarterback 28 coming into this week. Let's put it to you this way. Even if you're in a desperate situation where you don't have a second quarterback to play unless it's Quinn Ewers, I still would say he's not necessarily better than a positional player that you have on your bench in the flex position just because he's a quarterback this week. That's kind of the realm we're talking about here with Quinn Ewers. Don't love it, especially against Tampa Bay. Lots of blitzes. It didn't look very good, and I felt like it looked pretty good for what it could have been to begin with. So no, we try to go a different direction. All right, so let's move into something else. Remember, like I said, it doesn't always mean that your resources, your assets for week 17 are pretty. And this question is the epitome of who's hot and who's not. Because here's the names I'm going to list off to you guys. And the question is pick 2 for a half-point PPR league. But here's the names. Breece Hall, Rico Dowdle, Jalen Waddle, and Michael Wilson. These are 4 names that are very prevalent in the majority of fantasy football leagues out there. And yet, every single one of those names, in my opinion, has a huge, huge wart that makes me not excited to have to play them. So we're going to try to get through this. We'll talk about why. Chase, let's go to you first. If you have to pick 2 from this group, what do you do?
Oh, yuck. I'll try not to shoot myself in the face over it, because this is not a pretty situation. But I'm going to say, unfortunately, Jalen Waddle has the best matchup on paper if you look at just how these guys are matched up against the defenses they're going against. But we just talked about the problem with Jalen Waddle is that he's catching passes, or ostensibly catching passes, getting passes thrown in his general direction of the stadium from Quinn Ewers. I'm going to go with Wilson, and I'm going to go with Dowdle, and I'm going to tell you why. Wilson has the better quarterback situation by far over Waddle. And he's facing Cincinnati, and Cincinnati does not have a pass rush. And Cincinnati has been tough against opposing wide receivers in terms of like their fantasy scoring. But I just like that offensive situation better than I like the Miami situation. So I'm going to go with Michael Wilson. He's the highest ranked of the four of them for me. The next one up, I'm going to go with Rico Dowdle. Like I said, he's the only one of these four players whose team is still playing for something. And even though we were a little worried a couple weeks ago about Chuba Hubbard and coming back and that, Rico is still getting the bulk of the snaps. He's still getting the bulk of the work, and he's still getting the vast majority of the targets. Last week, he out-targeted Hubbard 6-1. So I'm willing to take my shot on that. I said Waddle has Ewers. I think that analysis goes far enough. But then Breece Hall as a player, I like so much better than Isaiah Davis, but that team has been mailing it in for 10 weeks now. And he has been ceding work to Isaiah Davis lately, especially last week. It's late in the season. They may want to see what they have if they decide to move on from Breece Hall. And so I don't trust that situation, especially against the defense like New England's. And so almost by process of elimination, though, it's Wilson and Dowdle.
Okay. Adam, what do you got?
Yeah, I tend to agree, especially in half-point PPR. I don't know that I'm as terrified of playing Waddle just based on Dowdle's output hasn't been good for a month. Having said that, I think in half-point, I do still skew slightly to Dowdle, but in full point, I would probably flip the two and go with Waddle for that second spot. But Wilson's the slam dunk. He's definitely playing for me.
Okay. So I'll give my answer first and then get my rundown as to why. My answer would be, unfortunately, because I don't feel great about it, but it would be Breece Hall and it would be Jalen Waddle. The reasons it would be, first of all, with Breece Hall, look, as far as the warts are concerned, Brady Cook playing the last 3 weeks has only led to 3 jet touchdowns. It's not been great. And the Patriots, for the most part on defense, have been pretty stout against the run. They are coming off a game in which Derrick Henry just went for 100 yards and a touchdown, had a nice performance there. Breece Hall has still been getting 15 to 18 opportunities, even with Brady Cook under center. So the volume has still been there. That cannot be said for Rico Dowdle, who has been failing to reach 60% of the snaps for the last 3 weeks. And it's not going away with Chuba Hubbard there. And again, with their matchup against Seattle, that favors Hubbard because they are more apt to give up receiving yards than they are rushing yards. I don't like the way they're utilizing the two of them. They're making them too interchangeable and therefore both useless. Rico Dowdle's been the running back 37 over the past 4 weeks. So you kind of have an issue there too. Then we go to Michael Wilson, who on paper had a nice game because he had 50 yards and a touchdown. But it only took Marvin Harrison playing 61% of the routes run for Wilson's targets to drop to 3. Now, we can be fair and say, look, that was by far the least amount of passes Jacoby Brissett has thrown in any game that he started this year. Sure, 100%. But that's all it took for him to essentially do what I feared he would do. The bailout was that he had the big touchdown on the big play. But that's what we fear with Michael Wilson. All Marvin Harrison has to do is be healthy. All he has to do is be active. He doesn't have to be playing full time. And then with Waddle, I mean, it's not great, but at least he's been the wide receiver 36 over the past 4 weeks. At least it's a matchup with Tampa Bay. Of all the matchups, has the favorable matchup where he can get open. At least he had 70 plus yards a week ago with Quinn Ewers playing like that. So that's why ultimately I'm taking the matchup and the fact that Waddle was competent with a healthy amount of volume, and Breece Hall, who of the rest of the guys, I can actually trust the volume on. But it kind of shows you it's a little gross. I don't know. Do you guys want to rebuttal?
No, I can't argue with what you said. It's like we've all just said. It's not a good situation, but you have to just go with your gut in these situations. Don't overthink it. Go with your gut. Don't switch your lineup 16 times between now and kickoff. That's for damn sure, because you no matter what you decide in the end, if you switch your lineup 13 times between now and Sunday, you're going to end up landing on the wrong guy. That's just how it works. Make the decision and go with it.
Good luck to you guys. I know we all kind of gave you a different answer, so have fun with that. All right, anyway, so Michael Carter, Kyle Monangai, Blake Corum. Pick 2, Adam.
In what feels like the most bizarre thing for me to potentially say, Carter feels like the lock of the group. I don't know how we've gotten here, but here we are. The other 2 is kind of a toss-up because on paper, everything about Monangai is better. The snaps are more consistent. He has more red zone rush attempts over the last month. But the explosives with Corum are really interesting. It's the better offense. I think Monangai, it's just more sustainable process-wise. I think that's the route that I want to choose. But it's just hard to look at it and see the fantasy points over the last month for Corum versus Monangai and make that call. So that decision between those 2 is really tough. I'm going to lean Monangai, but it's tough.
What do you think, Chase?
I'm going to agree. I'm going to agree with Adam here. For me, weirdly enough, Carter is the guy that I really didn't question in this trio because he looks like the guy that Arizona wants to play out of the guys that they have left. They just don't really seem all that psyched up for Amari DiMercato. Kiner is not a thing in fantasy. He's not a thing in the NFL necessarily either, except for taking up a roster spot. Yeah, I'm not worried. I'm not going to be shying away from anybody based on Kiner. The Cincinnati matchup is gold for a running back. It's going to be a good game, I think, for whomever they hand the ball to. But for me, I think that Carter's the guy. So Carter's the guy I'm going with of the 3. Of the other 2, Monangai looked strong last week. He's splitting snaps much more evenly with Swift. And Monangai, weirdly enough, because he's not necessarily like a fast runner or anything, and that was one of the knocks on him, I think, in the draft process. But he gets work in the passing game. And because of those kinds of things, and because I think that this game is going to be competitive, this is a big game this weekend for the Bears and the Niners. I'm going to lean with Monangai. Corum, yeah, I mean, if Corum was the guy, Corum could be a guy, but he's still just the clear running back 2 in Los Angeles in snaps and everything else. So I'm going to go with Carter and Monangai.
I wish you could. There's no way for me to hit a showdown here. I don't have an angle on it. But here's what I would say. You guys both think Michael Carter's lock-in, and he's the one I'm not choosing of these 2. Flat out. It is Monangai and Corum for me by a landslide. So Corum's been the RB9 over the last 4 weeks. What's going on with the Rams is that we talk about Monangai, who's splitting evenly with Swift. Corum is splitting evenly with Kyren Williams. The only difference is Kyren Williams is getting the first drive, and he's getting the first drive out of the second half. That's where he gets an edge. Otherwise, it's drive for drive. It's your turn, then Corum's turn. Williams' turn, then Corum turn. And then depending upon how long those drives last or what kind of scoring opportunities they wind up in dictates their fantasy points. And Corum has been the RB9, while Kyren Williams has been the RB10 over those past 4 weeks as a result to that. And they have a matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. I am playing Blake Corum. He is the highest ranked running back I have of this trio. Then for me, it's Kyle Monangai after that. So he's been running back 30 over the last 4 weeks. This is like, make no mistake about it. I know Jonathan Taylor had less than 3 yards per carry and it didn't look great. They didn't really try to run the ball too much against San Francisco. The 49ers are a team that you can run on, especially when you try to run up the middle on them. And he's splitting, to your guys' point, drive for drive, essentially with DeAndre Swift. Very similar situation. The only difference between DeAndre Swift and the Monangai combo and Blake Corum and Kyren Williams combo is that Swift is much more involved in the passing game. There's a distinction there as far as the role goes, where there's not that much of a distinction as far as a Rams platoon goes, as far as whether it's passing situations or not. There's not a big distinction there. There is one for the Bears, where it does favor DeAndre Swift a little bit in that case. You do need Monangai to score as a result, which is why he's more of a flex play. Talk about Michael Carter. You say you're not worried about Corey Carter. I'm not worried about Corey Carter as far as like presenting value, but he stole 5 carries, and then you mixed in Amari DiMercato. They played the Atlanta Falcons, who has been a matchup every running back for the last 5 weeks leading up to last week's matchup has been able to take advantage of. And he was a running back 43. I don't think there's much of a difference between Atlanta's run defense and Cincinnati's run defense, especially over the past month. In fact, Atlanta's run defense has been worse over the past month than Cincinnati's had, and he wasn't able to take advantage of it there either. I think more of the story here is that the Cardinals' running game is just not fantasy relevant, period. And that's kind of what I want it boiling down to with this mix. I don't know if you guys want to rebuttal because you both went one way and I went the other.
I mean, the only thing I want to point out is that, last week, the running back, the snap split between Williams and Corum was like 70-30 to Williams rather than the much closer to a 50-50 split the week prior. In week 15, they were much closer. It was like 39 snaps to 33 snaps or something like that.
Again, it's drive for drive. So that comes down to what drive lasted longer. The Williams drives lasted much longer, but it was very much drive for drive. And Corum still put up a decent amount of fantasy points despite playing 30% of the snaps.
And that's true. But I'm just saying, it's still, last week, it shook out 65 snaps to 27. I mean, I don't know. You tell me what they're going to do in a game this week against. I mean, they do have a good matchup this week, like you said. They're playing Atlanta this week. They should be in front in that game. They should be able to run the ball in that game. So I'm not going to pound the table for any one of these guys over any of the other two, but I'm still comfortable with Carter and Monangai.
Anything to add, Adam?
No, I think that echoes my sentiment. I just to me, both of their situations seem more like sustainable. The opportunities I think are a little bit better. Corum's had great fantasy output, so I don't knock the decision to play him, but it just doesn't feel sustainable. It really doesn't.
Corum's been very efficient lately, and you need that efficient to me.
Well, but this past week he wasn't. He got the touchdown. Otherwise, he would have given you a dud.
Exactly.
Sure, but the fact that he's getting those opportunities, it's not Kyron squarely in the red zone anymore, like it used to be. It used to be just Kyron in the red zone. It's not. And that goes back to the drive for drive thing. Like, if that drive finishes in the red zone, it's Corum's drive. They're letting him finish it, and that's kind of what it boils down to. That's what's changed over the last 5 weeks than what we had, let's say, earlier in the season. But let's move on here. So we got the Jalen Hurts versus Buffalo or Caleb Williams versus San Francisco, and this person wants to know, who do I start for my fantasy Super Bowl? And if I can quote the league, don't call it the Super Bowl. Just call it your fantasy football championship. What are you doing, bud? But anyway, besides the point, Chase, let's go to you here first. Which one of these guys are you going to start? And honestly, I know a lot of people out there are going to be talking about well, this is obviously Jalen Hurts, name value. This is a conversation I think does need to be had. So what do you got?
No, it's definitely a valid question. I mean, you look at what they've done. What have you done for me lately kind of thing? I mean, Hurts doesn't have a rushing score in his last 4 games. When's the last time we could say that he's gone over a month without a rushing score? That's weird. Okay. But if you look at things, he still has performed for you over the last month, with the exception of the Chargers game. And that Chargers game is a complete and total aberration, not just this season, but in Hurts' entire career. That Charger game, you have to throw that out in terms of thinking that has any bearing on anything. That was not indicative of who and what Jalen Hurts is as a football player, as a fantasy player. It happened, yes. Throw it out. And with the exception of that game, Hurts is still performing as a top 5 type quarterback there. Caleb has looked marginally better lately. He threw a very nice ball to DJ Moore to win that Green Bay game last week. Broke my heart. But he is still completing fewer than 60% of his passes on the season. 49ers are a better overall defense, I think, than what Hurts is going to be facing. Maybe this is anti-Bears bias to me for a quarterback, but I just can't get off of Hurts as the quarterback 6. This is why you drafted him, to have a running quarterback like him in your fantasy championship, not your fantasy Super Bowl. Their passing stats are similar enough to me over the course of the season that I want the guy with more rush scoring upside. And even though he doesn't get a ton of yards, we all know that Jalen Hurts has scoring upside as a runner. So I'm still going to go with Jalen Hurts over Caleb Williams this week.
Okay. Adam, how do you see this?
I'm keeping Hurts as well. Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of what you said. You got to really expect a positive regression on the touchdowns rushing for Hurts soon. we haven't seen him go a month without a rushing touchdown in a long time. So I kind of expect that to carry itself around. You have to pull, you can't pull punches against the Bills. This is an important matchup. It not necessarily from like a seeding perspective, although it is for the Bills, but more so like this is a marquee matchup. There's no punches going to be pulled here. So I mean, candidly, it's just to start your studs thing. Not that Caleb hasn't shown to be a stud, but even like if you go look back at that Bears game entering the fourth quarter, Caleb Williams is like 7 fantasy points. If no onside kick, you get like 10 points out of Caleb Williams. That's not exactly a recipe for success. And you can't play fantasy that way. Obviously, he gets all the points, but just saying, like, a 1 in a million play happens, and that's the only reason he had a good game last week. Like,
I feel like that's been the MO for Caleb, though.
It has been. Their late game comebacks have been, but he said start your studs, and I agree with that. In this case, for me, it boils down to Caleb Williams is a top 12, top 10 type option in fantasy, but Jalen Hurts is a top 5 type option. Go with the higher. Yeah.
Is he? All right, so you're both saying Hurts. I may or may not disagree with you, but I'm going to go through my little spiel first. Over the last month, Hurts has been the quarterback 19.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams has been the quarterback 16. So he's been a little bit better. Not greatly better, but a little bit better over the last month here. And the recent trends really matter when we get into this part of the season because a lot of things have changed since then. Now, here is the trade-off that Hurts is facing. The Bills are top 5 in points given up to the quarterback position, but they are giving up the 4th most rushing yards to the quarterback position. To your guys' points, the big thing that has dragged Hurts down is that he's not rushing, especially in the red zone, the way we would expect. He's not doing the tush push nearly as often for whatever reason. Very odd. But also just not running in the red zone on his own. Like we've seen plenty of times where Jalen Hurts is 10 to 15 yards out and scampers in for the end zone. We're not seeing that either. That could be an option with the Buffalo Bills. If that is an option, the ceiling that has not been Jalen Hurts as of late could be on the table come week 17. I don't rule that out. San Francisco's in the middle of the pack. I literally in person just watched him almost give up 300 yards passing to a 44-year-old man named Philip Rivers. This is not a good defense for San Francisco. I'm going to say that right now. This is not a good defense. This is a Ben, please, for the love of God, don't break type of defense. That's what they're playing from a week-to-week basis. Now, Caleb, unfortunately, has the issue of Roma Dunze probably won't play. Luther Burden probably won't play. He's kind of stuck holding on to Colston Loveland and DJ Moore, which is still enough to do some damage, but it is going to have to come off of play action with their running game. They're not going to ask Caleb Williams to throw it, let's say, 35 times in this game, and he's a little bit more dependent, let's say, than Jalen Hurts is on those dropbacks. Caleb can run too, but he doesn't have the presence in the red zone the way that Hurts has had, at least not the track record to go with it anyway. This is what this question was hard for me because Hurts is my QB 10. I don't think he is a top 5 guy right now. But Caleb Williams is my QB 11. I literally have them one space apart from each other. So I'm leaning Hurts on the idea that his ceiling could potentially be there due to the matchup with Buffalo and how they play rushing quarterbacks. But it is awfully, awfully close in my mind. And that's what I think makes it an interesting conversation because I think Caleb actually has the better matchup overall in this week. But I would slightly go Hurts and agree with you guys there. All right. I got another quarterback question for you guys. This will be fun. Adam, we'll go to you first. Jaxson Dart or Tyler Shough for the championship week. That's where we are. By the way, before you even answer, there's actually a lot going on right now. And I thought it was interesting because of this question in particular about Tyler Shough, even though we started week 9, 10, whatever it was, potentially winning offensive rookie of the year. Brutal. So Dart, Shough, comments, go for it.
Yeah, for me, it's no question Shough. The problem with Dart is the red zone rush. It's Jalen Hurts. Welcome back, buddy. The red zone rushing is gone, and now you kind of suck. Like, it's the same situation with Hurts, except a lot worse because Darts is a lot worse of a quarterback. The red zone rushing just hasn't been there, and it's created a big issue for him. since he's come back from his latest injury. So for me, it's Shough. Shough has honestly played really well, and it in a sustainable way. In the Tennessee matchup is super nice. We saw them really unlock and like let him throw the ball around in a win. Like this wasn't like, oh, the game script is tough, so you can go throw it 40 plus times. Like they were still throwing up. So clearly this coaching staff is going to put the ball in Shough's hands. Like he's making calls at the line of scrimmage. He's doing veteran quarterback things. And it just feels sustainable. And the last couple of weeks, I know when it first happened, we kind of made fun of like the mobile quarterback Tyler Shough. We had that question a couple weeks ago. The last 2 weeks have been designed runs. They are doing designed runs with Shough now. So it has become real that the mobile quarterback Tyler Shough. So it's not like you're even giving Dart that advantage. Because Dart outside of last week when he ran well but didn't have a rushing touchdown, like he hasn't really been running that much the last couple games. So I think it's Shough. I think he's the better passer, and recently at least as good as a runner lately.
And even last week, even though ran a little bit more, none of them was designed. No. They're still not designing him runs. Chase, what do you go with?
No, I'm going with Shucky Ducky as well here. I mean, they both have the rushing ability upside, but like Adam just covered, the only one who's actually getting to take advantage of that rushing upside lately is Shough. To me, it feels like ever since he came back from that injury, the interim staff there in New York is kind of reining in Jaxson Dart in terms of his running, because I think they're trying to keep him healthy and kind of teach him, hey, you got to play a certain way to be able to stay alive in the NFL and not get yourself RG3 out right away. So, he hasn't been able to run as much, and when he's not able to run as much, he's not as good a quarterback. He's not as good a fantasy scorer as Tyler Shough has shown in the last month or so. Don't let the Taysom Hill farewell game from last week fool you. Shough is going to have more opportunity this week. I think they're not going to have as much Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill's not going to come in to throw a late pass for a 30-some yard touchdown. I know that much. Tennessee is still terrible, so that's a good matchup. Like you said, Shough has the better top weapon, in my opinion, in Olave, who has been all world lately and has looked good and has looked like what we want him to look like. And I mean, Las Vegas last week, they did a pretty good job of limiting CJ Stroud and Houston in the passing game. So you put all that together, hey, feel good about yourself because you are starting a rookie quarterback in your chip, but that means you did good work elsewhere on your roster to get you this far. You probably lost Mahomes just now, or maybe you've been piecing stuff together for a month with Daniel Jones being out, but I mean, you've done good work on your roster, so feel good about yourself, even though you're having to hold your nose and play Tyler Shough over Jaxson Dart for your championship.
My mind's just blown that we're here at this point. Like, Shough was a second-round draft pick, 26 years old. Didn't even know this guy could be NFL competent. Jaxson Dart, first-round pick. Both have mobility and supposedly the ability to throw the ball a little bit around too. And yeah, Shough has been by far the better quarterback. He's been the QB 9 over the last 4, while Dart's been the quarterback 28. Dart had 1 quarterback point last week. 1 point last week. 30
Ewers was better.
Yards passing. Yes. 33 yards passing.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? So I don't care if he ran a little bit more. Ever since I told you guys this was going to happen. If they are not going to design runs for Jaxson Dart, they're going to ask him to protect himself from injury, the whole thing comes crumbling down. Because there's only 2 things he can do. He can throw the ball over the middle of the field, and he can run. If you're going to take away the running, the defense can drop back in zone over the middle, and he does nothing. It doesn't matter who they're playing against. It doesn't matter what weapons they have. It doesn't matter who's calling the plays. And this is why I'm not a fan of Jaxson Dart. Not a big fan of Tyler Shough either, but Kellen Moore is letting him sling it loose and letting him sling it all over the field. And Kellen Moore is actually, to be honest with you, Kellen Moore is proving to me that this guy is a legitimate good play caller. Because now we have 1 year where he took the Eagles to the Super Bowl, and he was the biggest difference in that as far as the offensive play caller goes. We're seeing it this year because without him, Eagles look like a totally different team. And even now with the Saints, even though this is not going to be a good winning team at the end of the year, the fact that they have been competitive the way they have been with that like farce of a talent across the board of that team tells me everything I need to know. Shough has Tennessee this week. I definitely like Shough a lot more heading into this one. And in fact, he actually cracked my top 12 at the quarterback position for week 17. So I have him actually as a starter all the way too. Let's talk a little defense. We got a couple of defensive questions. It is that time of year. So Jaguars or the Lions? Who do I start, Chase?
It's Detroit for me. Last time out against Minnesota, week 8, they were the DS10 in fantasy against Minnesota. They had 5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss in that game. They are playing without Brian Branch, which changes the calculus just a little bit, but JJ McCarthy is out. Max Brosmer is in. That sucks because Brosmer sucks. And McCarthy, honestly, I mean, had been maybe-ish playing a little-ish better. Jacksonville fared pretty well against Indianapolis a couple weeks ago, but that was also the Jones injury game, so you can't really take anything away from what they did in that game. Rivers, looked like a viable quarterback in that San Francisco game last night or the other night. So, up until he threw the pick 6, he was a QB 16 on the week. So he wasn't completely, overmatched and incompetent. He looked like a guy who understands pro football and made the throws they were asking him to throw for the most part. It's a much better matchup for Detroit with Minnesota. Don't overthink it. It's the Lions this week.
Okay, Adam. Jaguars or Lions?
Yeah, it's the Lions. It's Max Brosmer. What are we talking about? Have you seen the guy play? Like, look, say what you want about Rivers and his physical ability and whatnot, but like at the end of the day, his two interceptions since coming back have both been down to multiple scores, end of a game, trying to like throw his way back in it. It's not like like the first 3 quarters, he has been extremely safe with the ball. It's not like he's bleeding turnovers. Like a sack fumble is probably a decent bet, but it's not like he's, like I said, he's not bleeding turnovers. So Brosmer, on the other hand, we've seen bleed turnovers. And that's certainly a defense that they're the opposite of bend, don't break. They will they're either getting a bunch of sacks and a bunch of turnovers, or they're getting flooded with points. That's just kind of how Detroit is. And I don't think that the flooding with point option is happening with Brosmer at quarterback. I think it's going to be the other. So it's Lions for me pretty handily.
Okay. This is an interesting question for me because I think this is more of a tale of, do I want to take a shot on a ceiling on a defense, or do I want to play more of a floor? The ceiling would be the Detroit Lions because Mac Brosmer looked like he didn't belong under center in an NFL uniform. And that could open up the door for a lot of things. Having said that, I don't think the Lions secondary belongs in an NFL uniform. So there's a little bit of a back and forth there when it comes to that. I do think has a wide variance, let's say, when it comes to that Lions defense. When Brosmer started, first of all, it was against Seattle. So not only did he look bad, but it was against what was the top defense at that time in the league in addition to, and he threw 4 picks. And it was awful. Don't get me twisted, but it was still Seattle's defense. The Lions the last 4 weeks have been the 24th ranked defense because they have no secondary, because they have nothing. Last week, Brosmer was 7 for 9. It wasn't awful when he came in for JJ McCarthy. Jacksonville, over the last 4 weeks, has been the second best fantasy defense that you could possibly have. And even this past week against Denver, who doesn't give up a lot of turnovers and then kind of annoying in that way offensively, they were still the top 10 in scoring because it still got enough sacks. Adam, you and I just sat there and watched that Colts team on Monday night. That offensive line is in shambles. And there's a big difference between the 49ers defensive line and the Jaguars defensive line. That defensive line will get home. That defensive line will get sacks and potentially fumbles as a result. I have the Lions ranked 6, but I have the Jaguars ranked 4th. So I am slightly going with the Jaguars over the Lions. However, I'll go back to what I said earlier. If you feel like you need to take a shot for the ceiling, I think the Lions have the bigger ceiling because of what Max Brosmer may provide for that defense going into it. But I still kind of favor the Jaguars here a little bit. Don't know if you guys want to rebuttal.
I'm not overly crazy about the Vikings offensive line either. So
they're both like you're starting a top half of your options defense. So I
concur with that. Okay, so let's move on here. We got start 3 out of Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Devonta Smith, and Stefon Diggs. This reminds me so much of the other question because these are names that we're talking about. So Chase, let's start with you. If you have to pick 3 of these 4 wide receivers, which direction do you go?
I'm not going to argue with anybody. I'm just going to tell you Mike Evans has to be one of them. He's back to being a wide receiver 1 type. Tampa Bay is fighting for their playoff lives. Baker is going to throw to his BFF. Mike Evans has to be one of these 3. The other 2 for me, you kind of brought it up earlier. One of my concerns with the Bears, that Odunze might not play and Burden might not be available. And I'm not worried about Ja'Day Walker getting anything more than the 2 looks he got in that game, even though one of them went for the tying touchdown. Colston Loveland is still going to be Colston Loveland, but DJ Moore is going to be just about all they have on the outside there. He looked like what we wanted him to be when we drafted him this year over the past 2 games. So I'm going with DJ Moore. Even if Odunze and Burden do play, they're receivers with lower body injuries. I'm bulky about that. So I'm going to go with DJ Moore as well. And then it comes down to me having to choose Diggs over Smith. Diggs is coming off of his highest volume game in over a month. I realize that. So it might feel like I'm saying to chase the points there, but New England, again, they're fighting for the number 1 overall seed. Diggs is still the most talented wide receiver in terms of current NFL ability on that roster. And Smith has just always been kind of a meh play for me. And he catches the ball so short that he doesn't necessarily have any blow-up games. He doesn't necessarily have that blow-up game ability that Diggs, at least, I think, has in him. Smith also has the worst matchup of the 4 of them. So for me, I'm going Mike Evans, DJ Moore, and Stefon Diggs.
Okay. Adam, what do you got?
I am the same pretty much all the way, except I am monitoring the status of the Patriots wide receivers for their health before making a call on Devonta Smith versus Stefon Diggs.
That's fair.
If Booty plays and if Pop Douglas play, if they're both there, I'm probably going to end up with Devonta Smith. I feel safer on the floor, and I just can't afford 4 points from Stefon Diggs. If there are 3 of their wide receivers, or if those 2 are out and he's guaranteed in the top 3 the whole game or most of the game, then I'm taking Diggs. The upside's way better with him than Devonta Smith, or typically at the very least. It just comes down to that situation. The rotation with the Patriots is so tough if they're all healthy. And Drake May will spread the ball around. Drake May also does not have a ton of pass attempts. He's just been remarkably efficient. For me, I struggle to trust Diggs if there's that many mouths to feed. If it gets whittled down, which right now, fingers crossed, it might be, then you hope that those receivers don't come back, because Diggs would be the better play if that's the situation. You would be excited about that, I think.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this over the weekend when we were hanging out, but just to piggyback off of that, Diggs last week ran 80% of the routes. He did not hit that 80% route mark since week 11. Oh, by the way, when Kayshon Boutte was out. And that was also the last time that he was a viable fantasy football starter. He was a wide receiver 14 that week. Since then, if he's been in your lineup, he's been hurting you, not helping you. I don't think Boutte's going to play. We are going to, again, this is a game that actually happens on Sunday. So we are going to have this on the injury inquiry episode when we drop that on Saturday morning. But him, DeMario Douglas, my vibe is right now those guys are not going to play, which means Stefon Diggs should be in line for 80% of the routes. And what's very clear to me is that when he actually gets to play, he's clearly the best wide receiver for the Patriots. Why it takes this much to get him to play, I don't know. It made sense earlier on in the season because he was an older wide receiver coming off of an ACL injury. Okay, I get it. We're in the part of the year now where you want your offense, you want your teams to be hitting full-fledged tilt heading into the postseason, and yet it still somehow takes injuries for this guy to get on the field on a consistent basis. That's Josh McDaniels for you. What are you going to do? But the point is that if he's on the field, I want Stefon Diggs on my lineup. Evans been targeted in the end zone back-to-back weeks. DJ Moore has been the wide receiver 4 overall the last 2 weeks with no Luther Burden, no Rome Odunze. Again, another situation where I don't think we're going to see Luther Burden or Rome Odunze again this week, even though it is a big match against San Francisco 49ers. So I'm with you guys. This is the first time we actually all agree. Evans, DJ Moore, Stefon Diggs. Devonta Smith, by the way, in case you're wondering, he's been the wide receiver 41 over the last 4 weeks. No, I don't want to touch Devonta Smith if I can help it. All right, so let's move on to another defensive question. The Rams or the Saints this week? Yep, we're talking about the Saints defense for fantasy purposes. Chase, which way do you go here?
I'm going to go with the Rams. They've been the better overall DST for the season. New Orleans has been hot lately. They've been hotter lately, but I think they've faced a much more fantasy-friendly schedule than the Rams have had over the last month or so. The Rams have been the better overall DST, though. They're tied for 6th in sacks in the league. They're 6th in interceptions. They're tied for 9th in fumble recoveries. So this is a team that not only gets home in the pass rush, but they turn the ball over. If they're facing teams that I think they can shut down, which I think they can against Atlanta, I don't think that Kirk Cousins is going to give them a ton of problem. I trust them better than the Saints. I just don't think the Saints are quite up to par with what the Rams can do. So, I mean, to me, it's just going with the team that's been consistently better all year. Tennessee has played better-ish, of late, but it's just Los Angeles is a better team. So I'm going to take the better team here.
Okay, Adam?
Yeah, I also agree on the Rams, where I think that Kirk has played better the last 2 weeks. I think that comes from he is still mentally there, and he can attack teams who need to blitz to get pressure. He can do math and figure out where the open spots are. The Rams do not need to blitz to get pressure. They can, and they have, but they don't have to. They can get pressure with 4. And if you can do that against Kirk Cousins, you're going to give Kirk Cousins problems. So I think that I think the Rams should be A-okay. They're the better unit. To echo your sentiment, unless there's like a glaring mashup issue, which I don't think there is in this case, then I think you just go the route of the better team, better defense, better unit. And then Ward's been playing better lately. Like, he's looked all right. I know obviously that team is very bad, but I don't think it's going to be anything crazy for the Saints defense. It wouldn't be crazy, but I don't think it will.
It's the Saints. The Rams are a farce, and they have shown that the past few weeks that their defense is a farce. Thank you, Seattle. Thank you, the Panthers. What they have shown you is that outside of a couple of penetrators on the defensive line, they're not very good anywhere else. So if you don't get those sacks, if you don't get those turnovers based on those 2 penetrating, you don't get fantasy football points. They have been in the bottom 20 over the last 4 weeks. Saints defense, on the other hand, they've taken care of their good matchups. They have been the defense 7 over the past 4 weeks in fantasy football purposes. Cam Moore's been playing better, yes. So has Kirk Cousins. The Atlanta offense has actually been more efficient than it has been at any other time of the year under Kirk Cousins. Now, don't get me twisted. Kirk Cousins on Monday night tends to be a very different quarterback than the Kirk Cousins we get on Thursday nights. That has not lost my escape here in any stretch of the means. So I will keep that in mind. But the Saints defense, the one thing that they were really having trouble with early on in the year, because they were so banged up on the defensive line, was the running game. And when you're a bad run defense, it's hard to generate sacks. It's hard to get turnovers because, you're back on your heels constantly. They've been one of the tougher run defenses over the past 4 weeks. Tennessee's been mostly better on offense because Tony Pollard has got it going over the past month. If they limit him and have Cam Ward dropping back with no effect from play action again, I think what we're going to see is the Saints defense outscore a Rams defense in what I think could be a low-key shootout game on Monday night next week. Drake London's back. Kyle Pitts is rolling. Bijan Robinson is fantastic. The Rams run defense. Look, you want to say their defense as a whole is decent? Okay, fine. Their run defense is very much a farce because you get anybody who has any kind of running game, they give up 5 yards carry. So I'm very confidently on the Saints. In fact, the this week, and the Saints are in my top 10. That's how far my gap is. So we'll show down on that one, boys. I like it. I always like it when we get a good defensive showdown. We'll see what happens. Go ahead, rebuttal if you want to.
How'd that defensive showdown go for you last week?
Who was it? I don't remember. I actually
conveniently forgets. Okay. There were 2 showdowns last week, and it was me and Adam against you in both of them. So one, Dan, you took the Kansas City DST, and Adam and I were both on Buffalo's DST.
Okay. Yeah.
That worked out for us. Pretty well.
Yeah,
the other showdown was
mention we get hurt in the first quarter, but yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
It's all right. It doesn't matter. It was what it was. The other showdown was Adam and I were on Ashton Genty, and you were on Aaron Jones, and we came out far ahead on that one. Yeah. Genty finally had a Genty game.
The Raiders finally gave Genty the freaking ball.
Exactly.
That was the big thing. They finally gave him the ball, which is really
rushes. Yep.
Let's talk about that for a second. So Genty has been given the football the way that he should, once every 5 weeks. And when he does, he looks like Ashton Genty from Boise State. But getting him to actually give him the ball and that consistency of a basis is what's mind-boggling. But yeah, no, you guys took me to town last week. Live it up.
What you just said though, you're completely right. When he gets 20 plus, carries, when he gets the ball like he should,
it's fantastic. Yeah.
Or when they're throwing him the ball 8 times a game, like they have before, he produces. Even with that absolutely god-awful offensive line that they have that allows him to get hit before he even touches the football in a lot of cases. But when they give him the ball, and we'll talk about him a little bit later, about foreshadowing, hint, when they give him the ball, he is who we thought he was in terms of his abilities and translating to the pro level. It's just like you said, you have to convince their flipping offensive coordinator, whoever it is at any given moment, to actually hand him the football or throw him the football.
It does make me excited for him for next year when Pete Carroll likely gets fired. So we'll put it that way. Let's move on to our next topic here. So Justin Herbert, who just came off the big game against the Dallas Cowboys. I think that's why this is more of a question here. Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence, Adam?
Oh boy. I would love to say that I could go Herbert. And Chase, I know looking at the document, you're going to echo the same sentiment. I want to. In my heart, I want to. But the streak that Trevor has been on is, once you've done that against Denver, then you are a must start at that point. You don't bench him. I don't know who I would bench him for, genuinely. Just based on the run that he's on against the defense now with Denver that he's done it against. The Jacoby addition has completely changed that offense. It's ridiculous. So I think you keep riding Trevor. He probably got you here. Got to keep doing it.
Chase, you echo that?
Oh, all day long. It's not about who I would rather have on my team that I'm cheering for in real life, or if I'm coaching. It's about who I want in my fantasy lineup at the moment. Lawrence is the hot hand. Multiple passing touchdowns in each of the last 5 weeks, including the Giant game 2 weeks ago. He's had a rushing score each of the last 2 weeks as well, and has shown some ability there that we all kind of always thought he probably should have had. Herbert's facing Houston. It's a good defense. Lawrence is facing Indianapolis. It's a much better matchup for him anyway. He's the QB4 on the season. I gotta go with Trevor Lawrence, as much as it feels like I kind of got to swallow and keep it down a little bit. It's Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence is no longer a bust, gentlemen. Liam Cohen with the Jacoby Myers edition has found a way.
Yep.
He's finally come to fruition. He's been the quarterback 1 overall the last 4 weeks. Now, a lot of it has juicy matchups, but juicy matchup, we didn't see Trevor Lawrence take advantage before. And then to your point, against Denver this past week, not a juicy matchup, still very much need to be in your fantasy football lineups. And the only quarterback who beat Trevor Lawrence this past week to be the quarterback 1 overall was Brock Purdy, who played against the Indianapolis Colts this past week. So, yeah, there you go. Trevor Lawrence, he is my quarterback 1 overall heading into this week in my rankings. Last question we'll talk about before we get to the DFS Cocktail Hour. Yeah, I got to start with Adam because this got to be near and dear to his heart. So this guy has Warren. Should he drop Warren for Harold Fannin, Kyle Pitts, Dalton Schultz, or Colson Loveland? What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, probably. It depends. I probably would rather have still the usage is still there for Warren, so I would still probably have him over Schultz. I don't fully trust Schultz with Stroud. I know he's had good weeks, but it became less consistent once Stroud came back. He has been definitely good lately. Having said that, Pitts, Fannin, I'm probably taking those guys, and I'd probably rank them Pitts, then Fannin. Loveland and Warren are fairly close, and then I'd have Schultz last. It just doesn't feel super juicy for me. But still got 8 or 9 targets out of Warren this past week. He is still very much so involved. It just didn't work out the way that you would have hoped. But Pitts is both involved and it's working out. So he's certainly gonna be the better option for me.
All right, Chase, what would you do?
Yeah, the answer is yes. If you can drop Warren and pick up Kyle Pitts, you do it. He's the best option of all of these guys right now. He's one of the hottest players in all of fantasy football, period, regardless of position here. London got some looks last week, but he still looked shaky. He still looked like he wasn't sure of himself there, had some uncharacteristic drops, things like that. Fannin, if he's available and Pitts is not, he has a great matchup for fantasy tight ends in Pittsburgh. He's about the only thing that team is going to have going for them offensively because I don't like any of their receivers. I don't like their quarterback, and Quinshon Judkins is out for probably the next 9 to 12 months at least. So Harold Fannin, I think that's a decent move too. I agree with you, Adam, that Warren and Loveland is a lot closer matchup, and I know Schultz has been better. I've never been a Schultz guy. I'm also I am a Cade Stover guy, so I might be a little biased against Schultz. But Loveland has a better matchup at any rate between the two. So yeah, if you can drop Warren and pick up either Pitts or Fannin, do it. And also, I would like an invitation to whoever's league this is next year, because if Pitts and Fannin are still on your waiver wire, what other freaking stuff is out there that just is waiting to be picked up that no one has paid any attention to lately? It's tight end, and you're leaving Pitts and Fannin on the wire? Come on, guys. Keep an eye on things.
No, that's fair. We don't know what the league setup is either. But
I don't, but still, I think the Fannin and Pitts should not be on the wire at this point of the year.
Agreed. I think the beauty of this question is that Tyler Warren, who is ranked far ahead of all these tight ends that we're talking about, we're going to week 17 championship. And for me personally, I take all 4 of these guys over Tyler Warren. So Tyler Warren has been ranked or has been performing as the tight end 25 over the last 4 weeks. Now, Adam, you hit on the head. His usage is there. He's over 80% of the routes run. He's getting 24% of the target share. Typically you look at those numbers, you're like, all right, this is a dude, positive regression should be on the way. It just hasn't been working out. And I'm not necessarily going to say against Jacksonville, we're suddenly going to find the fixer or elixir. This is not necessarily a great matchup here for Tyler Warren to suddenly bounce back in either. Fannin has been getting targeted like a wide receiver 1. Kyle Pitts has been getting targeted like a wide receiver 1. Even with Drake London back, he still had 9 targets last week, and Drake London doesn't look like he's 100%, so I don't think that necessarily disappears against the Rams. Again, I talked about that be potentially a low-key shootout type of ball game. Colson Loveland's cooled down as of late, but he's still getting primary targets inside of the red zone, and they still don't have Roma Dunze or Luther Burden. And it's a matchup I think they should be able to take advantage of. Schultz has been hot. Schultz has been a top 10 tight end over the past month with CJ Stroud back. So when I boil this all down, right now, I take all 4 of them. Kyle Pitts is in my top 3 for this week. Fannin's in my top 5. Schultz is in my 8, and Loveland's my tight end 10. Warren's my tight end 18. He's not even on my radar. I'm not trusting him going into a championship week. That's pretty much what it's boiling down to. But with that, it's time for a drink.
Yeah, hey, it's another holiday. We talked about it before with Thanksgiving, but it's another holiday, another reason to get together and be merry and bright and have a drink or two. So we're gonna mix one up here for you. But first, we're gonna try and win you some money in your DFS lineups here. So for this week, again, weird slate this week in terms of DraftKings and how they kind of stack everything together. Remember, we have 3 games on Christmas Day, which is Thursday. Then we have 2 on Saturday, and then the rest of them are on Sunday and then our regular Monday night game. But for the DraftKings slate, you can't get like all of the oddball games. So like the 3 on Thursday and 2 on Saturday, you can't mix all 5 of those together. You can only do all 3 of the Thursday games, or you can do the Thursday night game paired with Saturday, or you can do Saturday as a standalone. And then they also have all of their other options. You can always do all of the early Sunday games together and whatnot. But for the purposes of what we're talking about, we're going to go with the slate that we always go with, which is the Sunday games. So the Sunday noon or 1 p.m. if you're on the East Coast games, those games and the Monday night game, that's the ones that we're looking at for purposes of this exercise, at least for the ones that I'm going to give you. And when I look at those, the second highest over-under on the slate is Chicago at San Francisco. I talked about it a little bit earlier. We've talked about a lot of different facets of this game actually so far on the program. And it's a big time matchup. This is a game that's going to have, playoff implications and home field implications and all kinds of things like that for the NFC playoffs coming up. So this is a game that I think they're both going to be pulling out all the stops. And so for that reason, I'm going to go with Brock Purdy as my quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers here at 6,200 on the week. I think that's a pretty affordable salary. He's QB6 on the slate in terms of salary. For the week, he's ranked QB9 ECR wise. So I mean, you're getting a decent price for him in terms of where he's ranked there. He's QB8 on the year in points per game. Remember, he's missed a lot of time, but the games he's played, he's been phenomenal in, and he's been even better probably than that lately. He's on a 40 touchdown pace in the games that he's played. He's not going to obviously he's not throwing that because he's missed half the season, but the pace that he's on, the per game pace, throwing touchdowns, he's on a 40 touchdown pace. He's played very, very well, probably sneakily so in some people's eyes if they haven't been paying too much attention. He's having the best fantasy season of his career in terms of points per game. He's averaging his most passes per game, but he's scoring these points because he's kind of throwing shorter. He's got the fewest yards per attempt of his career so far. So they're asking him to make, I think, some high percentage throws. He's throwing them to Christian McCaffrey, who's been healthy all year. He's throwing them to George Kittle. He's throwing them underneath to his receivers. The other tight ends on the roster have performed pretty well when they've been called on as well. So I like Brock Purdy here. He's been outstanding the last 2 weeks, if you've been paying attention. He's 8 total touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, back-to-back top 5 finishes in DraftKings scoring at a quarterback position. And he's facing a Bears team that gives up the 10th most points to the quarterback position. I said second highest Vegas total. Give me a guy who I think can throw the ball all over the place and will throw the ball all over the place. We'll go with Brock Purdy. And we are going to pair him in this game with his receiver, Jauan Jennings, at 5,600. Jauan Jennings, 5,600. There are 16 guys who are going to cost you more to play than that. He's wide receiver. He's a borderline wide receiver 1 for the week in terms of the ECR rankings this week at 13. Now, he leads the San Francisco 49ers in receiving touchdowns. He only trails CMC in targets on that team. And we've got a little bit of an injury situation to watch here with George Kittle. Now, we talked about it, I've talked about it before. I'm not a giant, I don't like paying up a ton for tight ends. I want to play Jauan Jennings in this game. If Kittle is healthy and you want to put him in there too and stack either him or him additionally, I'm cool with that. But remember, Kittle's got a little injury situation to watch. If he's out, that could lead to even more red zone usage for Jauan Jennings, who already gets used in the red zone quite a bit. Chicago gives up the 3rd most points to opposing wide receivers. I like that matchup. And again, Jennings is an affordable option at 5,600 for what I think he can give you this week. So I really like those 2 49ers in a big game here against the Chicago Bears. With that being said, I mean, that's kind of the base that we're building our DFS cocktail off of. So for our cocktail that we're building this week, we're calling it the Pits because we're going to use a couple of pit fruit flavors here in this drink. We're going to use cherry flavor. We're going to use some peach flavor. So I'm going to start this cocktail off by adding 1.5 ounces of brandy and then 1 ounce of cherry flavored bourbon into my shaker. Okay. And I'm going to toss it to you guys then now, Dan and Adam, before I move on with this cocktail. Any thoughts on playing this 49er stack here, on playing the twosome, on playing Kittle over Jennings, or are there other guys that you're thinking of at the quarterback, wide receiver positions?
I mean, that's not a bad setup. You can still very much throw in Chicago. I just think the quarterback answer, if it's anyway besides Trevor Lawrence, only $6,100. Like I said, it's my number one quarterback on the week. I feel like might be the wrong answer. And then I have him paired up with Jacoby Myers, who's $5,300, who's even cheaper than Juwan Jennings. So I think you're getting the better combo for a few $100s cheaper when I look at this thing. And the other big value, before I kick it to Adam, that I'm staring down the barrel on is Kenneth Gainwell, who's only $5,600. DK Metcalf suspended for the next 2 weeks. Gainwell's already, just to quote, Adam and I's conversation, Gainwell has been the wide receiver 2 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like not a running back, a wide receiver 2 who happens to get a few carries on top of it. Now Metcalf's going to be out. It's going to be check down city to Kenneth Gainwell, who we actually saw this past week gets bombs 50 yards down the field on top of it. So those are some values that I'm really staring on the barrel at this week. I don't know. You got Adam.
Yeah, I echo Jacoby Myers and would go to the say that even if you play the Niners grouping, which I agree the Jaguars one's probably a little bit better, but I do think there's some validity to that Niners grouping. Jacoby Myers should be in there regardless. His value is insane at $5,300 against a Colts team that type of receiver it crushes consistently. So he's someone who I would want to talk about regardless. And then Tyrone Tracy is another value who I really like. He against the Raiders. He didn't get in the end zone last week, so for your fantasy football purposes, he wasn't anything spectacular. But he got 70 yards again. He's still their lead running back. He's been playing well. He was efficient on the ground, so he's a name that I'd go for at cost. He's one of the last cost running backs that's actually worth it.
He was in my lineup too, Adam. So he was actually one of the guys I was thinking about mentioning. I just mentioned Kenneth Gainwell instead, so I'm glad you mentioned Tracy. That was pretty sweet. We got Chase.
No, I love all those guys as options in a lineup. Yeah, if you don't want to play, or if you only want to play the Jennings play or the Kittle play, if you want to play up, if Kittle plays and you want to pay up for your tight end, yeah, using Jacoby Myers and Lawrence as a stack then is very affordable. And I think, he's going to score you a lot of points as well. So I like those matchups, or as guys you can fill in around the people that I'm talking about here. At running back, Kenneth Gainwell is really affordable. I like that play a lot. I'm going to play Ashton Genty this week, coming off of that big game last week. He's been disappointing this season. We've said as a draft pick, only insofar as the fact that you drafted him running back 6. He's still been a running back 2 for you most weeks this season. In retrospect, we probably should have applied the "but it's Vegas" caveat to drafting him. We probably had him ranked all of us a little bit too high. Obviously, his talent is there, but his usage wasn't. But he's coming off of his second highest fantasy total of the year. He was the RB1 overall, RB2 in DraftKings scoring last week. But I don't think we're point chasing because, like I said, he did that last week against a pretty dang good defense in Houston. And the New York Giants are not a pretty dang good defense in terms of their defense against the run game. They're favored at home. Giants give up the 3rd most running back points, in the whole league there. I would certainly love to see him have 20 plus carries again. I think that he could. Keep in mind that he only saw 2 targets last week. He had been averaging about seven targets, 6 or 7 targets per game for the past 2 months. Last week, he only saw 2 targets. Now, yes, he did take one of them for a 60-yard touchdown, catch. But I think he sees more targets than 2. I don't think they limit him in those targets like that this week. The skill set's still there. He's a good value play. And he's my top value play of the week in terms of the points per dollar that I think we're going to get out of him. I have him as top value over Chase Brown, who I think still is in a smash spot against the Arizona Cardinals run defense that is also not very good. Also at running back, I'm going to be keeping an eye on Travion Henderson's injury, because if Travion Henderson is out, I think Ramondre Stevenson would be a very good start against that New York Jets defense there in an excellent fantasy running back matchup. But let's return to this, put the rest of the ingredients in here before I shake this up. We already put in 1.5 ounces of brandy and 1 ounce of cherry bourbon. Now we're going to put in 1 ounce of peach nectar, another pit fruit like a cherry, and we're going to put in 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. Okay. So as I shake this up here, I mean, guys, any thoughts on Ashton Genty or on that matchup there? Anything you guys are questioning?
But all it comes down to, are they going to give him the football? Like I said earlier in the show, that I don't care what the matchup is he going to get the amount of volume that he is supposed to get? If he does, yes, absolutely fantastic. Could I see it going right back to Ashton Genty gets 12 carries and 4 targets, or sitting there holding a thumb on our butts? Yes, 100%. I could see that too. That's kind of the issue when you talk about Genty. But $6,100 against the Giants, no, I'm with you. He's in a lot of my lineups too. Thinking that after last week with Houston, being is a new offensive coordinator who won't be there long, but regardless, it's hard for me to imagine that you're suddenly not going to give Genty 18 plus opportunities. It's hard for me to imagine that. So I like it.
Right. Adam, you got anything to add to that one? Or?
Nope.
All right.
Completely agree.
Well, let's look at the number 4 option on our in our DFS lineup this week. We're going to go with the namesake of our cocktail this week. We've talked about him already on the show, Kyle Pitts. Since we're calling this the Pitts, it's the Pitts if you lose in your fantasy championship, even though you can be proud you made it there. And it's the Pitts when your DFS lineup doesn't hit. But we're going to go with Kyle Pitts for $5,300 at tight end here. He's a tight end 4 in salary this week. And again, I mean, based on what he's done in his career, it kind of feels so wrong, but based on what he's done lately, it feels so right to have him in this lineup. He's finally looking like a semblance of the tight end, the fantasy tight end we all thought he could be. Even if you ignore that monster week 15, he still has been a pretty dang good matchup this year. Over the past month, it's been him, not Trey McBride, that's been the fantasy tight end 1 overall. He leads all tight ends in that span in targets, in receptions, in yards, in touchdowns, and incidentally then in DraftKings points as well. He's already set career highs on the season in receptions and touchdowns. He's on pace for 120 plus targets, which would be a career high. Last week, again, gave you 7 catches on 9 targets and a touchdown. This week, he's facing the Rams, and the Rams are 19th against tight ends, but they give up the 8th most points to opposing wide receivers. Okay. So when you look at how Pitts is used, he's a large wide receiver for all intents and purposes. Okay. He spends about 55% of his time in line, coming off of the line as a tight end lined up, tight to the formation, but he spends 45% of his time in the slot or split out wide. So they really use him as a big receiver most of the time. I think he'll match up just fine against the Rams there. I'm okay. Like I said before, tight end wise, if you would rather stack Kittle with Purdy, if you want to play, if he plays, that's a great matchup for the value for the dollar. I can't argue if you want to pay way up and take McBride again this week because he's facing the dang Cincinnati Bengals. And we know how that works out for tight ends generally. So, I'm not going to argue with any of those guys, but for me, I like Pitts for the value for the dollar this week in our lineup there. And so, I've shaken this drink up, the Pitts. We're going to strain it into a coupe glass here. Got kind of a nice little pinkish red color there. And we're going to garnish that with some cherries. Again, not the bright red ones, but the good ones. There's our Pitts. I would like to say, hey, keep in mind, you can catch the article on this segment. I have an article out on it every weekend, so you'll get the actual recipe for this. Plus, I go a little more in depth into the picks that I had, and we'll talk about some other picks as well, like some of the ones the guys mentioned here. Happy holidays to everybody, whatever you celebrate, and Slanjava.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. Make sure you guys download Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app and check out our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network channel at FF Advice Net. I'll be back tomorrow, or if for you, it actually might be later in the day. Maybe dropping 2 episodes in a day. We'll have to see. But we'll be back with Chaz Florida Sports Betting Weekly because we're going to line your pockets green before Christmas Day. Make up for all that moolah you spent on all those Christmas gifts, hopefully for you guys. So make sure you tune into that. We'll be back with that. And later in the week, of course, the injury inquiry episode. So until then, everyone, Merry Christmas.